react. You whispering my name, thinking I won't be the same. Turn fiction into fact. See what you didn't know, bruises that I'll never show, slipping on your every jab. So tighten up your fist, step into the ring with this. I hope your mama's got your back. First round, you thought you would've knocked me down. Fifth round, bleeding out the side of your mouth. Final round, holding the sound of my name in the crowd. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. You didn't bust. Oh, 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 oh. Just 'cause I took a break, you're making a huge mistake, thinking you can take the throne. Look at you trembling, step into the lion's den. Bet you wish you stayed at home.
Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and with me today is Xandering. Xandering, how are you?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm in Crappyville internet, so forgive any strange audio issues.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, judging by the green room, judging by setting that up. I think it's going to be we'll see. We're roboting a bit on occasion, but you know what? We got it under control. We'll get this taken care of. So this is we have figured Nate's lamp is okay. And my jacket and his lamp have patched things up. We invited Nate to come back. I think his lamp has forgiven the suit, the $400 suit. So it looks like we're good. So today we are going to be bringing back Nate the lawyer. Haven't had him on in a long time. And this is a topic, as Andrew, you and I have actually spoken about the topic of the gender pay gap and somewhat about women's soccer. And I asked you to check out Nate's videos. What did you think of his videos?
I thought they were very well informed, and they presented both sides of the argument instead of just saying, "Hey, I think this." He brought up what the arguments that they were making were, and I thought he touched on the strongest of the arguments that each side was making as well. So I thought it was really well done.
Well, and he also has a lot of other videos, and you pointed this out. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff there. We got a link to his channel, link to his video, link to all the videos that we're going to be discussing today in the description below. But I think you also said that you really like the Rittenhouse video, which I think is hard for people to understand exactly what happened there. But yeah, I've been following him for a while, and we just really appreciate every time we have him on. I love having him on. So without any further ado, please welcome Nate the lawyer. Nate, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing good. I think Xandering
Can you guys hear me?
Yep. You're up, and everything's going good. So it's it's been a while, man. And you've had, oh my God, a wild ride. You just got the silver play button. Is that right? Or the silver YouTube?
Yeah. I just got the. Let me make sure my camera's good. Yeah, no, I just got the silver play button, which is amazing. It's just it's one of those things that well, me and you've talked about this before, just about having a plan with YouTube and being able to do things in a certain way where you can where we're just to be successful, because a lot of people think YouTube is just getting on and saying your piece, but there's a lot of planning and research that goes into it, and I think a lot of people just don't realize that actually happens. So
Yeah, well, your videos I think also reflect that, and we can see, you can see they're well planned out, and they're well edited and everything like that. So we still edit some of our videos, and oh boy, that takes forever. Do you like the live or the edited more? What do you like better?
Well, I think the fans, I get more traction with the edited videos because I think people, we live in a society today where everything's got to be at your fingertips. Information travels that way now. And I think, most people are used to trying to absorb media in these 2-second or 2-minute, I said 2-second, 2-minute chunks. So my videos are trying to take these complex topics and cramp them down into those nice digestible chunks. So, sometimes it takes 20 minutes, sometimes it takes 15 minutes. But I think the best part about YouTube and doing my style is that I want the viewer to come out of watching my video more informed and not take a lot of time. So that's usually the battle that I have. The battle, because a live stream, you can sit there and I can talk as long as I want. But if I want to get you to understand a concise point and have you evaluate, new facts based on that point, that's it's hard to do, but that's why I think I've been getting a lot of success, because people appreciate when you are able to do it. So,
well,
I certainly know I appreciate it, and I think you do a pretty damn good job.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
yeah, it's like I've always. Go ahead. I think we're talking over each other.
Yeah, there's a little lag here. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but please, Nate, finish.
No, well, I we've been doing the YouTube thing for a while, and I started with just live streams. The first video on my channel was a live stream, and I enjoy live streams because it allows you to kind of free flow, meet new people, and really just get in deep with these topics. Like the topic we're about to talk about tonight, which I think is just so fascinating because there's so much misinformation about the gender pay gap, equality. Like when I tell most people, the Hillary Clinton says that the gender pay gap is is a farce. Most people are shocked by that. And because they think that Joe Biden. They watch Joe Biden. They say, well, Joe Biden says it's real, but they don't know that he doesn't know what he's talking about. So a lot of times, and I think that's what we as YouTubers try to do. We're trying to inform the viewers of just things that they may not just know is true or accurate. So hopefully, when people who watch this will now be informed, so they can go out there and make those real decisions.
Well, so that I think is one of the really interesting ones. Now, I didn't know much about the women's soccer, and I didn't know a whole heck of a lot about the pay gap, and I've been doing some research of that on my own, as Andring has found that issue fascinating for quite some time. So we managed to discuss that a lot, but I saw when Biden did this tweet, and I'm actually going to put the tweet up here. Let's see. I'm just going to go right up over my screen. Actually, let me put that up over the whole thing there. So, don't give up the fight. This is not over. So this is the U.S. women's national team, and then to U.S. soccer. Equal pay now, or else when I'm president, you can go elsewhere for World Cup funding. And then shortly after this, he declared that, that especially after they lost their first suit for equality, he came out and said that the fight's not over, and that we have to have equal pay for women now. And then you did a whole bunch of videos on this, and it turns out there was a lot of information I didn't really know, and it was, I thought, really worth trying to understand better. So now this is one of your sort of cornerstone pieces, so this is something you know a lot about. So why don't you explain it to us if you don't mind, and let's start there.
Well, it's essentially what happens is the U.S. women's national team sued the Soccer Federation for equal pay. And at first, I believed the claims too. I actually believed that they were being paid unequally. And their argument was twofold. It was saying that if they win the World Cup, like they've done multiple times, that they would have won $66 million more if they were paid like the men. Which sounds reasonable, right? You've won the World Cup and they, have brought in more money and all this stuff. So why are they being paid less than men? So I was all team USA, like, yeah, they should be paid equally, especially if they're winning. That just doesn't make any sense, right? Because confusion is where these things lie. The more confused the audience is about the topic, then the more people can deceive you on whether the thing is actually accurate or not, or the information is accurate, because people don't just have the information. So I remember when I first read this case, I read the judge's opinion on the motion to dismiss. And the opinion was, to say, for lack of a better word, disastrous for the women's national team, because the judge went through it from, like really meticulously. You read their negotiation, you read what happened. And at the end of the day, number one, the women's team got paid more than the men. Like overall on a per game basis, they actually got paid more. So they were suing. They went to court suing for gender discrimination, being paid more. So the pay gap was on the other side. The second thing is that essentially what it came down to is the women's national team wanted guaranteed money. And for instance, they got $100,000 guaranteed salaries, plus another like $60,000 in guaranteed salary, plus for a full benefits package. That's what U.S. Soccer paid to the women's national team. And the men's national team were guns for hire. So in other words, they just got a sales job. You get sales and you get commission. So the men were just getting straight commission, no salary, no nothing. So the women's national team, when they sued, they were like, well, we just want to talk about the bonuses. We don't really care about salary. But the judge said, no,
let me pause.
If this is about equal pay, we have to talk about pay.
So let me pause for 1 second here. So so the men were getting 17,000 each per game. The women were getting only 8,000 per game. So right off the bat, that kind of looks like the women are basically getting half, right? And so the reason that's not true is that they were guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the what happens is that that's only what's called game bonuses. It's like if you have a sales job. Mm-hmm. If I give you a guaranteed salary for $100,000, then I'll give you a zero, and I say you get no commission, right? Your commission is zero. So no matter how many shirts you sell, since I'm paying you $100,000 up front, you can sell one shirt, you can sell 1,000,000 shirts, you're still going to get $100,000. But if you're on commission only, no salary, then obviously if you sell 1,000,000 shirts, you're going to get more money versus you sell one shirt, you're going to get a lot less money. So your upside is really high for commission, but your downside is really low. So in the case of the men winning a game, the aspect of winning a game, if the men, since they have that high bonus structure, if they won a game, they get $17,000 at Matt. Well, that's one of that's the most that they would be able to get, and the women would just get the most at 8. But that doesn't take into account that the women get full benefits package, pregnancy pay, travel pay, all this other stuff, and they get guaranteed salaries. So in one instance, they are correct. If they win the World Cup, they will get less. But last year during COVID, and this is what I think killed the women's national team's whole argument, is last year during COVID, they happen to still be under the same agreement. So the U.S. Soccer had to cancel all the games because of COVID-19. And something very interesting happened. Mm-hmm. Because the men have a pay-to-play structure, they actually got paid zero because they didn't have any guarantees in their contract. So they got paid absolutely nothing for a year. They got a big fat zero. But what did the women's national team get? Well, they got over $4 million in salaries, bonuses, all that stuff, all the stuff that they got because it was guaranteed money. So on one end, in this situation, we got to see both the extremes. When the women win, how they don't get as much as the men when they win. But when there's absolutely no games, the women got paid millions of dollars more than the men. And that's the difference in what's going on here. There is no discrimination here because the discrimination here, as we see it now, happens to be against the men. And one last thing about this is that U.S. Soccer recently offered both sides the exact same deal because they said, we're not playing this game anymore. We're going to offer you guys the exact same deal. And since the women, technically, as a matter of fact, right, this is a legal fact. They found this in court. These are facts. Mm-hmm. Since the women have been getting paid more than the men, equal pay means they're going to have to get paid less, right? Because they're going to get paid more, the men are getting paid less. We're going to equalize. One comes down, one comes up. So they can actually get less money asking for equal pay. And that's why now they're saying, well, if it's less than what we got before, that's not really equal. We want more. So this is the problem with it, and essentially the whole thing was built on they were essentially trying to use the equal pay argument to more or less scam the public out of $66 million. And it just wasn't successful because, a court just went through it and said, no, you guys are full of lies. So that's exactly where we're at right now.
All right, I want to play this for a minute in light of that. So, and then I had written this down. So basically, the women got signing bonuses of $230,000 each. They got revenue share of the tickets. They got severance.
Signing bonus.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they got, they got pregnancy protection, health, and dental, which the men's team did not get. They got the guaranteed rest time. They got $37K just for qualifying, which the men would not get. And then it turned out that by the time all was done, so they had all of these benefits that they got that the men did not have and didn't want. The men were happy with it. The men said, we're just play for performance. And then it turned out the men's team was really kind of bad. So the men's team didn't do all that well. They didn't make all that much money. And then COVID, they got wiped out. The women's team was going to make less money in these bonuses, but it was this guaranteed income. But by the time all was said and done, the men made only $18 million, which came out to be about $212,000 per player. The women made $24 million, which came out to $220,000 per player. Now, these are the numbers that they got. They had the benefit of the secured contract. This is, again, Joe Biden and ostensibly the head of the women's soccer team. So let's listen to this real quick.
Swear for World Cup funding. Now here is Megan Rapinoe and Joe Biden on Equal Pay Day.
You see, despite all the wins, I'm still paid less than men who do the same job that I do. For each trophy, of which there are many, and for each win, for each tie, and for each time that we play, it's less.
It doesn't matter if you're an electrician, an accountant, or part of the best damn soccer team in the world. The pay gap is real. And this team is living proof that you can be the very best at what you do and still have to fight for equal pay.
All right, so that was apparently it looks like basically none of that's true. Now, I assume Biden doesn't know that because he just listens to his advisors. He doesn't have time to go through the whole thing, but she has to know that at this point. So, so that's it. Now, you shared a video with us, and I find a couple of things interesting. First of all, and I want to make something clear because Maya had said this a second ago, quote, oh, hold on. Well, I'm going to scroll up because I thought she said something that was very interesting. And I want to, before we go any further, I want to make sure that we have this clear. I don't think anybody on this stream is suggesting that there isn't discrimination and that it isn't real and that it doesn't make life harder for women and that they don't, in many cases, have to work harder to get the same recognition. But I think looking at this, first of all, this kind of thing doesn't help. when they lie about this and this becomes kind of a national issue and it turns out that it just really isn't what they're claiming, that doesn't help solve any problems. But a step further than that is in a number of other cases, it appears as if the problem, while there is this gap between what men make on average and what women make on average in this country, there's actually a lot of nuance there. And while gender and discrimination is a part of it, not only is it not necessarily, not only is it not the whole thing, but it may not even be the majority. There may be other sociological issues contributing to that gap, and the gender, the gender discrimination, while still an important part and worth talking about, isn't necessarily the largest part, and fixing that isn't necessarily the largest fix to narrowing that gap. Does that seem to summarize everybody's position here? I think roughly.
I see. I would agree in part, but then I would like to add a little more context to it because, I think a lot of people when you hear gender pay gap, it's automatically discrimination. So I usually respond that the gender pay gap doesn't exist, because really, after you do the research, you'll notice that it's really a gap in choices. The choices men and women make. When you, if, and it's frustrating because the nuance is dead now in our world. So it's like, if you're not just saying something that's outrageous, then it's like, oh, we don't want to really hear it. But I think nuance is very important in this particular sense. Think about this. This is what the research shows, for instance, when it comes to the gender pay gap. The top 5 paying jobs that you can get, like aerosmith engineer or whatever, the top 5 paying jobs are predominantly like 70 to 80% men, right? Those are the top paying jobs. Where if you get those jobs, you get them to pay the most money. If you flip that to the 5 lowest paying jobs, right? And these are just professionals. That's like your teachers. Those are your psychologists and those professions. Those are predominantly women, and a lot of the choices that are being made by young men and women going into the job market really depends. And one of the key choices is about having children and who's going to take care of those children. Now, I know that it's sad to say, but if you take a man and a woman and they both don't have any kids and they're both going into the workforce, there absolutely is probably no pay gap, right? I think the pay gap between a man and a woman who have no children is like, what, $4 or something like that. It's like for every $1 the man makes, a woman makes like 96 to 97%.
It was 96
So
cents.
it's almost non-existent. 96 cents so it's almost non-existent. But that difference is when a woman does have a child. In the end, it's now modern feminism is saying that that women making that choice is a good thing, right? Them choosing to be with their children over going to work is a good thing, and them having the ability to make that choice is a good thing. But that comes with a consequence, and that consequence, as Hillary Clinton and all these other predominant feminists say, is not one of discrimination, but one of a capitalist society and women being able to make the choice whether they're going to stay home and raise their children and give up those opportunities to make more money, or whether they're going to prolong having children so they can have those opportunities. And it's also reversed with men too. It's interesting because it's interesting because there's a lot of societal norms and things that we have to kind of overcome. But generally, there is no pay gap when we actually talk about it in what's actually driving it. And this thing that you have up on the screen is a perfect example.
All right, so we just put that up. I'd like to put this up again. And so this is one of the things, because even Hillary Clinton, so there was the Netflix special. It was Hillary Clinton, Greta Van Susteren, Rachel McAdams. And one of the things that they said was that, yes, again, there is discrimination, but that's not actually the biggest problem. In the countries that have managed to narrow that gap, it hasn't been about dealing with that discrimination. It's been about giving more opportunities, but not necessarily even just to women. In some cases, giving more opportunities to men. This is one of the examples that was used. So I'll put this back up here. So so what this is showing is that what happens is now women have a difficulty that men do not have. Men don't have this. Men don't really have to worry about when they start a family. They can start a family just about any time they want to. Women have to have made a decision about family, work, and all of these things, basically by the time they're 35, and they have to be working towards that decision, or else they are going to be in very big trouble. Men don't even have to worry about it. So what you see here is, there was a very small, so that up until a woman decides that she wants to have a family, up until that point, the pay gap is only 4 cents in the United States. But at this point, it drops. It drops for a number of reasons. It drops mainly because as a woman leaves the workforce, she ends up now not being able to still make the contacts. The man is still, he's still out there, making contacts, still trying to rise up in the industry. And then once the woman really is able to come back in the workforce, she has lost a huge opportunity that the man hasn't lost. And one of the solutions to this, as it turns out, is to actually offer and this is one of the ones that Hillary Clinton talked about, was to actually offer men paternity leave on a use it or lose it basis. They can't turn it in for anything else, but to encourage men to start to take up these positions and to actually come out of the workforce to be better parents, to be more present for their, and then by getting men to pick up that slack, this would shorten, if I understand correctly, this would dramatically shorten a huge element of this gap. Again, it wouldn't fix it. We'd still have other issues. And again, the discrimination is absolutely one of them. But one of the biggest is women are, and part of this is biology. Women kind of have to be tied to it. Men don't. So the question is, how do we accommodate for that to make sure they have an equality of opportunity? Is that roughly accurate?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about just quality of opportunity, there are more, for the first time, there were more women who attended higher education. There are more women in the workforce. All of these things are happening as we go. Now, when we talk about opportunity, we also are talking about, and that's what it also comes down to, choices. And I think it also comes down to societal norms, not really discrimination. For instance, when it comes to working longer hours, being, being there for late nights, those type of things, generally men tend to buy into that type of thing, and that's generally they kind of allude to that. That's how men are brought up, right? When a man has his first child, his thing is to work more, right? Oh, he's really got to work more to provide for that child. When a woman has a child, it's the exact opposite. Is thought of like, okay, she's going to have to work less because she's going to have to take care of the child, and that actually starts filtering out to the numbers that we're seeing now. But I think at the end of the day, the problem, if you listen to the experts, half of them say there is a problem, and half of them say there's not a problem. And then you do have that subset of women who chose to raise their children, chose to get paid less, and say that's not a problem, it's a choice. And I think when you talk about it as a choice, I think people then understand that there's no big voodoo man out there holding women back in this pay gap issue. If a woman wants to get paid the identical as a man, she is. And I think most jobs, that's happening too. Like if you're a woman police officer, firefighter, or work in a public sector, any public job, you're getting paid identical to the men. So for instance, the largest employer in the United States is the public sector, state, local, and federal governments. And all of those women who are working those jobs are getting paid identical to their male counterparts. That's a fact, right? It's a fact of government life. But I think a lot of people don't want to realize that what we're talking about is a subset of subsets, and talking about the private sector. And in the private sector, those are choices being made by people, because again, if a woman graduates law school and a man graduates law school and they both do identical things, they're going to make the same amount of money. It's just when it comes to having children, that seems to be the factor that really changes the game.
All right, I want to make sure Xandring gets in here. I think he's been quiet because we do have that. I don't know where this lag came from, and I do apologize for it, but I want to make sure that he gets a chance to come in. So and I'm sure he's got a good number of things to say. So I will bow out for a couple of minutes, and let's hear what Xandring has to say.
We'll pray that the internet gods let me stay clear. So you look at some of the places, like one of the two countries that have made some of the biggest advancements in reducing the pay gap, which is there, but it's there for numerous reasons, not just discrimination. Rwanda, which had a very tragic backstory, they started legislating, from the governmental side, saying, well, you're going to have at least 30% of your workforce needs to be women. And, they instituted quite a lot of top-down pressures to both encourage and kind of force people into hiring more women, which they did need. I mean, they lost a significant portion of the male population in that genocide. And then you have Iceland, which, took the same approach without having the genocide, and mandated, okay, well, we're going to, mandate all businesses have to give men, paternal leave, up to 6 months. And they also saw a pretty drastic reduction in that overall. And I kind of view it as you're taking away choice and mandating that it has to be this way. Do you think that the problem is, severe enough, or that it is enough of a problem that we would take away choices and mandate things just for the sake of making things look equal on paper?
Well, I don't know. I when it comes to how the government fixes, that's what I think essentially you're asking, right? The government fix. Do you mandate it? How do you do it? We live in a capitalistic system, right? The market dictates how much we get paid, and when we go back to soccer and we talk about, the athletics, this is more prominent in that. But in a marketplace, really, there are two things I think people don't realize. If I'm an owner of a business, my goal is to make as much money as possible with the least amount of overhead, right? So technically, if I know I can pay a woman half as much as I pay a man and get the same value of work out of that woman, then you know what? I'm going to probably hire the woman and then try to pay her less, right? Because that just makes sense. But in I think the way of thinking that we kind of put out there is it's like we'll say, why does that happen? If it's true that women make so much less, why doesn't it happen? Why are we just not hiring all women, in our company? Because we can just pay them less. And there's where it comes about the actual choices people are making, whether they're being offered those jobs or being competitive in those particular fields. And I think that's the idea here is and I think what Iceland did, and even in Rwanda, is to make it so everybody kind of has to make the same choices. Like, instead of the cultural norm that I think is trying to be overcome is women are the caregivers of children. Women are the ones who stay at home. Women are the ones who are not supposed to get the job. And let's not forget, that was 50 years ago. There was almost, the women, if a woman was in the workforce, she was just really a secretary. She was not in these high level positions. Now these things are different. So now the problem is that we need to get the men to now buy in on child rearing, I'm about to say, but taking care of children and child care shouldn't be exclusively argument for one gender. One gender shouldn't have that responsibility. If both genders take responsibility for that, then I think the gender pay gap goes away. I think it goes away because now you have men and women sharing that responsibility, and then the exports of that. But right now we live in a society where it's the man who is expected to bring in the big bucks, and the woman who's supposed to suffer. And you'll hear this a lot when you'll hear women say, "I got to choose between my career and my children." Well, that's a true statement, and that's true how women have to fight. I've even talked with my wife. She has dealt with this, right? She's gotten these great promotions at work, but she's like, I want to be home with my kids more, right? So she doesn't do those overtimes, and even though that's an anecdotal argument, but I think it's indicative of the overall trend, and it's sad because I would say women shouldn't have to make that choice alone. It should be a choice between her and that man should then choose, or maybe even take turns or something like that, like we did. But I think the answer is more of how we define gender roles in society and how that needs to change for the rest of this gap to close.
Well, and then
there's
please,
not just, like I said, it's a pretty, and so there's many aspects that go into how much somebody gets paid, and one of the big ones which you touched on earlier was the choice of career field. When you look at like the highest paying job, which I believe is still petroleum engineer, it's something like 90% men in that field. Mm-hmm. When you look at some of the lowest paying jobs, they tend to be the more social jobs of dealing with people. Yeah. I mean, see like CNAs, nursing assistants, all the tech and hospitals, they're overwhelmingly women. Yeah. And when you look at some of the policies put in place by the Nordic countries, Scandinavia, they've tried and made some pretty good advances in getting to a more egalitarian state. Applying more freedom of choice. If you want to pursue the STEM field, we want you to. If you don't want, giving them the choice of career paths, and we found that divergence between what jobs men and women choose to take got greater. there's a bigger difference. They saw that more women were going into fields dealing with other people, and the men were more likely going into fields that dealt with items, things, concepts, etc.
But hold on, can I add one layer to that too? Also, risk. Men go into jobs that are high. For instance, there's like 95% of the men on those oil, people who work on oil rigs are men, right? So risk is a high factor that determines if you tell me the job is extremely risky, it's more likely there's going to be a man working that job than a woman working that job 90% of the time.
Yeah, and environmental conditions. I mean, it's like
correct.
Almost all are men as well, and that's also a dangerous job. But you're working outside, all your loggers, etc.
Yeah.
So they found that when given the freedom to choose, people tended to sort themselves into these fields where the fields that men chose more often just paid more, obviously because of risk, because of overtime, because of a great many things, and that the fields that women chose were less. Which means that even if we got rid of, say, or were able to address maternity leave issues, so that the burden of caring for children and being out of the workforce to do so felt more equally between men and women. Even if we got rid of that, I mean, we're still going to be dealing with some other issues to this pay graph. And I see a lot of people that just don't care, as you said, about nuance at all. They just look at the end number and say, okay, there's a discrepancy here, ergo discrimination, ergo we must do something to make them exactly equal. And I'm wondering if some of these other issues are issues at all, if you think that they're issues at all, or if there's a role for government to try and fix some of these things. I mean, should government be trying to get more women into tech fields, or into the, being linemen, or being oil rig operators, or being petroleum engineers? Should we get, should they be trying to push more women into bricklaying? Any of these other absolutely male-dominated fields, and trying to push more men back into the medical community, which has become, very dominated by women, and try and these things out, or should we just let people just make their choices and let them choose what they want to do, and accept that there are consequences for those choices, such as possibly lower pay?
But there's a political argument to that, right? Because really the political system that you live in will probably dictate what the best answer for that is, right? Because in a capitalistic system, government is supposed to kind of lay the foundation for the market to work, right? So there are rules to keep everything fair, but really it's just like it's I call capitalism Darwinism for business, right? The weak shall be eaten and the strong shall survive, right? If when the business goes out, nobody's shedding any tears, right? That's just the way it is, right? so capitalism is that harsh, I think. But if we're in a communist society, then pay everybody equally, right? No matter what your job, petroleum engineer and kindergarten teacher, they should get the same salary. So in the system that I think we live in, it's going to be hard for government to regulate that, because the nature of it is that when you talk about risk, when you talk about risk adverse, and when you're talking about safety, women tend to, when they do these polls, women tend to choose the safer job. I think they did one poll where they asked, would you take a job that paid $100,000 salary, or would you take a job that was just based on commission, where you could make $500,000, but you could make nothing? And a high majority and men were like, yeah, we'll take that job, right? We'll take that job because we don't, we're young, we'll take the risk. And more women were thinking long term. Well, I can move up in the company, I have guaranteed stuff, I can work within the system. So they were looking, and maybe that might be it. It may be us maybe learning at a younger age that risk, it's okay to take that risk. But for some reason, I think when women grow up, they're taught to be risk adverse. Let's take care of the family. Let's be more careful, because, and especially when you have children, then that lowers the amount of risk you want to take, right? You don't want to go out there and take a risky job when you got two kids. It forces you to be more risk adverse. But as a man, you can take those risks. You can be more risk sensitive. And for those who don't know, that's the way businesses work. The higher the risk, the more the reward. And it's a shame to say, it's just like, betting in Vegas. If you bet on the Mega Millions lotteries, the risk is crazy, but the reward is insane too. So It is what it is, and I feel that government does have a role, but I think in our society, in the way our freedoms are, that role has to be limited to just laying out an environment so the capitalistic system can work. And if women choose to go into these jobs that don't pay much, either we try to incentivize women going into these higher paying jobs, but I don't think I don't think mandating or forcing them to do so is the right choice by any means.
Well, and I wanted to point out quickly too. There was we have a super chat I do want to get to, but Greta Van Susteren made a point in that same video that was talking about the causes of the multiple causes that are contributing to that gap in pay between men and women. And one of the things that she pointed out too is that if you mandate in one way or another that a woman shouldn't be penalized for taking time off for her children, which I think intuitively we can all say, of course, she should not be penalized for that choice. But then you have the flip side where she says there are men and certainly women who say, I don't want a family. And a woman who says, I'm not going to get married, I'm not going to have a family, I'm going to do all my time into making money, and I'm going to spend all the overtime I have, and who are hugely driven in a particular field. And usually the women CEOs that end up being in the Fortune 500 companies share this very similarly to many of the guys there. And she said, what happens if you tell them, no, we have to pay you less as if you had chosen to make a family, even though you didn't, and even though you consciously chose to try to maximize your earning potential. So it can cut both ways. This notion that we're going to accommodate or say that we're going to either raise the when they're taking time off to be with their family, we're going to give them equivalent raises, even with the people who have chosen not to have a family and are trying to compete with them. That creates an inequality there, and they have every right to issue a grievance because they say, I didn't want the family, and it was even a sacrifice. I chose not to have the family so that I could excel in this business. And now you're saying that I'm going to be kneecapped and have to compete with somebody who said, I would like the family and to compete at that level in a business. Is that now that was Greta Van Susteren's point in the Netflix documentary. So I assume
I actually. No, I thought I heard you guess the other. What's his name again? I'm sorry. Is it Ice? As landing? Is it as Ice? How do you say the guest's name? I mean your co-host name. I'm not the guest.
Andring.
Listen, he
say it one more time.
Isandring.
Got it.
Isandring, and no, he's a guest. We had him on. Oh dear Lord, we had him on about a year ago, and I haven't been able to disconnect him. He's been here every fucking time since then, and I don't know how to deal with it. But we'll try to figure it out. So he's always here. I don't know what to do about it. So Xander, I think you were doing a great job. So I wanted to put that. Oh, and I wanted to do the super chat. It was the Sinister Porpoise $5 super chat. Thank you so much for your support. Yeah. Quote: Women dominate elementary school teachers precisely for the reason that Nate is outlining. Solipsism is great. I can be as cool as Nate now. I'm a solipsist. I think that nobody else exists but me. And then they say, well, why am I arguing with people? It's because I'm a masochist too. All right. Anyways, I wanted to interrupt with those. So, Xander, I think you were talking about. So this is one of the interesting things. There is a common argument, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on the argument. There is a common argument that, okay, first of all, we do know for a fact that boards that have greater diversity do better in their companies. So, and that's a fact, and we know that. But we've also heard an argument that, okay, we also know that there's high levels of competition in sort of upper level management positions. And so there has been an argument that, well, we should encourage them to either adopt more feminine traits, be less competitive, so on and so forth. And so I was curious as to anyone's thoughts on arguments like that.
Sorry about that. My daughter came out and wanted to speak to me.
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
So, Xandering, let's start with you.
Yeah.
Let's start with you, Xandering, and then let's hear what Nate has to say.
I think that we should strive, just as a kind of personal thing, I think we should strive to encourage people to pursue what it is they wish to pursue, and let them, know that it's okay to pursue that which you wish to pursue, and let them go and let them make their own choices. No matter what, you're going to end up with a trade-off somewhere. Even in a communist society, you say, okay, well, we're going to pay everybody the same amount. There's definitely a trade-off in that. If you're going to pay chemical engineers the same as you're going to pay a kindergarten teacher, well, you're not going to get very good, chemical engineers. You might as well just exchange the kindergartners for your chemical engineers. So there's a trade-off even in those systems. And I think that, being able to have the market of people pursuing those things that they wish to pursue may not be their, heartfelt desire. I want to go be a wildlife biologist. And you look at the market and you're like, holy crap, 80% of wildlife biologists are out of work. Maybe I should choose a different field where I can actually have, gainful employment in it. And so I think that the allowing people to choose, but at the same time, providing the equality of opportunities, and letting people know that it's fine to pursue whatever it is that you'd like, and you can go make those decisions and decide what's right for your family, versus having, policy saying you must choose this, or we're going to start instituting, classes to make, men more feminine or women more masculine, so that I don't think that that's going to give us a good outcome.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. It seems like, I think we've been brought up to believe that any type of disparity that we see is some type of just some type of nefarious act behind it, instead of actually kind of just looking at the fine details and trying to understand it. And I think that, most of 90% of the studies out there will tell you that the discriminatory gender pay gap isn't real, right? It's not a real thing. What is a real thing is a pay gap based on these choices, and a pay gap based on societal norms, and a pay gap based on women choosing to go into these jobs that are safer, right? The kindergarten teacher gets you, if you think about it, if you're a parent, or if you're a new parent who has to take care of some children, being a teacher may be the best thing for you. You get the summers off. You're off every time your kid is off for all the vacations and holidays. It's almost a perfect job if you wanted to raise children, right? Because you have off every time your kid's off, and on top of that, you're sending your kid to school. So, versus someone, let's say if you're an oil rig worker, where you're going out on an oil rig for an ice, or what's it called, the ice fishers. You ever saw that the show on what's it called,
Jesus,
where they fish the crab out the Bering Sea?
Last catch, or the deadliest catch.
Yeah, the last catch, the most deadliest catch. How many women do you see working on those boats, right? Do you think they're out there saying we don't want women, right? Or women to be discriminated against, right? It's just that but the high risk, high reward, and they're out there for months, right? So, and that's what I think we have. That's what I think the conversation has to be about, because unfortunately, by just screaming that it's discrimination, even people on the left, the right, and the data say that that's not the case. But the screaming discrimination that gets people emotionally invested into it, but understanding why it's not discrimination, I think gets people intellectually to understand what's going on, and that's where I tend to be. I tend to want you to understand intellectually what's going on, instead of just trying to convince you emotionally that something that's not the case happens to be the case.
Well, and Xandering has studied this a lot more. I do want to do this one, and then I want to hear Xandering. I want you. Don't forget that thought. He forgets that. If I interrupt him for 10 seconds, he fucking forgets the thought. Write it down. Do whatever. Just like your pen, hand, whatever you got to do. I did want to point out a couple things. I do tend to actually rather strongly disagree that it's not at all an issue. I do think that you can reasonably claim that the gender pay gap is a myth because so many other factors contribute to it. But when we've accounted for every other factor except discrimination, which I think is hard to argue isn't there in society, when we account for every other factor but that, the closest you can get to is 96 cents on the dollar. So the question is, where's that other 4 cents coming from? And in my view, that at a minimum has to be discrimination. And I've also heard studies, and if somebody's got an argument against this, I'd love to hear it. But I've also heard, too, that women tend to not actually receive the same kind of resources in many of these positions as men. There was, in fact, a study in MIT that found, okay, so they've got only 8%, and I was just looking at this study, they've got only 8% of their professors are women. But as you see spikes in undergraduate enrollment of women, you see 4 years later the same spike in graduate students, new graduate students getting their PhD, and you see a similar spike in new professors. So at a minimum, it does appear like any inequalities are consistent throughout the tiers, and it's not just about the job, because it also has to do with the students. When the number of female students go up, the number of female professors also went up shortly thereafter by the same percentage. So it's A, how or why is that difference in students, but B, the professors have said that what happens is they tend to get the worst lab spaces, the worst offices, so on and so forth. Now, this was documented. I forget the name of the professor who did this study. I don't know. It's one that I've seen, and it does seem to me, I've heard this before. Maybe it's anecdotal, but I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say with that, starting with Azandrian, who I'd like to finish his thought.
Actually, this is a more interesting thing than my original thought was going to be. So I want to go with the first point you were talking about. Like, when you account for all other things, there's still a 4%. Well, there's something that you can't really account for. There's been some studies done on this, and this has to do with personality. The studies show that on average, women are more agreeable than men are. Men are generally a little less agreeable than women.
Excuse me, no, we're not. No,
hey, pay.
Go back a step. Go back. What the hell are you talking about? Oh shit. Sorry. Sorry. Please finish. I'll hang my head in shame.
I don't think I need to make that argument anymore. Thank you for. So, when it comes to negotiating pay for men, like raises, and are more likely to be insistent upon getting those raises, whereas women, on average, ask for raises less and are less assertive about getting their raise. And that's something that when you do a multivariable analysis on the pay gap, that's something that's really hard to take into consideration, because we know this in the abstract that this happens, but we don't know exactly to what degree it happens in the actual workplaces. So at least some portion of that 4 cents on the dollar that is ascribed to discrimination, at least some portion of that has to be that women are less successful in negotiating for higher pay than men generally are. Some of the psychologists that I've talked to,
if I recall, that 4% includes even positions where the pay is not negotiated for. So it's I'd have to look at it again, but I think that's one of the factors that comes pre that 4 cents on the dollar. I know what you're talking about, and I tend to agree with you, and I think let's stay on that topic, because I think that is an important one as well, and I think there are very good arguments on both sides of that one, but I actually think that one was already accounted for before the extra 4 cents. But please do continue your point, because I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah, some of the psychologists I've listened to interviews with, because I've got lots of time in the truck, so I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to a lot of interviews with people, and some of them are psychologists that talk about different kinds of social issues that are facing us today. And one of the psychologists I was listening to was talking about in his practice, his clinical practice, that he spends quite a lot of time helping women to be more assertive, to be less agreeable in their professional world, so that they can get ahead more, so they can get those extra raises. So it can actually be difficult. I know this happens with men as well. You do end up with quite a bit less agreeable men as well, and they don't tend to do very well either, as far as gaining more money for their labor. So it's just there's the situation, as I constantly seem to find myself saying is far more complicated than it would seem at first.
Hello? Did he cut out for
It
you?
sounded like he was mid-sentence, but I think he was actually done. So I think Nate, it's you.
Oh. Okay. Sorry, I was like, maybe did he cut out? Well, but I'll say this: for that 4%, I haven't been convinced that that is discrimination. I think the kind of the argument is, well, we know discrimination happens, and we have this number here, so it must mean this number equals discrimination. I think it's a part of that number, right? But I don't know if it's the full 4%. I don't even know if it's 0.5%, right? I've actually been involved in lawsuits for gender discrimination, but I don't know if that 4% is encompassing that full number. That to say that is, I think is just overstating that number, because I know some of it is there, but there are some other things that from what I've been reading, it's an unknown. And one of the arguments is that there's also going to be statistical variation. For instance, if you do all tall people versus short people, there's a gap. There's a pay gap, right? It's not going to be the exact same number. There's going to be a percentage pay gap. If you do all curly-haired people versus non-curly-haired people, there's going to be a gap. So it's just like, what's just statistical variation versus what's an actual real number, and how much is that real number? Is it what do they call it? Like when you do the polls, right? It's a 3% plus or minus.
Yep.
What's the plus or minus here, right? I don't know. The second thing is that, really, if you talk about the public sector jobs, we're not talking about public sector jobs. We're talking about a pay gap, even the thought of a pay gap, because those jobs, you don't get paid based on any gender. It's just, here's the title, here's the job, here it is. We can talk about opportunities and stuff, but it's 100%, and that's the largest employer in the United States is the federal government. So I don't think we're talking about that. Yeah, so now we're talking about the private sector, which now, every state's illegal, even federally, to discriminate against women. So we do have that law in place. Now, that doesn't mean that discrimination doesn't happen. And I agree. Case by case, discrimination happens, racism happens, these things do occur. But we're talking about at what level and at what scale does it occur, in which it's holding these people, the population of women, to having what do we 77 cents on the dollar than what men get paid. When Joe Biden says, or what's her name says that, women get paid 77 cents on the dollar than what a man gets paid, then it's just kind of like, well, is that accurate? And I don't think that is. I think the nuance is what we were talking about. And I think a lot of times when we look at this issue, we're so focused in on what we think the problem is instead of trying to address what the real problem is. And I think that's the data is showing us that there is a problem. Sinister Purpose says margin of error. And that's true. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. But I think the data is showing us something. But I'm trying to understand, is it even possible to get it to where it's, the exact same? Is that even possible? Understanding gender norms and all that stuff. And I think, and I forget what paper I read. There was a paper I read where that was the question that was being asked. It's like, is it even possible to truly have, for every dollar women gets $1 with no variation? And that doesn't seem like a possibility. There's always going to be some margin of error. But what's acceptable? I think 94 cents is good, but then I think 77 cents is bad.
Well, here's an interesting point, and I know Xander is going to want to follow up on this, so I'll try to make it reasonably quickly and let him follow up on this. But I think we probably could if we have very specific mandates and a tremendous government oversight that just said, okay, we're going to regulate everything, and we're going to. And the goal is to have complete, just dollar for dollar, second for second, everybody's being paid the same amount. But that's probably not best for anybody. Most individuals don't necessarily want to operate that way, and that seems to not be the way that our society is functioning. So then you're going to have a problem. Now, he had brought up something that I found interesting, too, which is right now in the medical profession, you have 4 females becoming doctors for every 1 male. And the question is, why is there this disparity? Is it because there is something inherent in the medical profession or in how schools are teaching that is keeping men out? Are we telling men that they can't be doctors or they're not as good? Or is there something else at play here? And the general consensus, as far as I understand it, is no, in general, especially now that, because it's funny, because men used to be told that they needed to be doctors because that's where you're going to make all the money and where you're going to, and now men are sitting there saying, like, I'm not as interested in that as I could be. And whereas Andrew had talked about agreeableness, and in business, agreeableness is a downside. It's a liability. In being a doctor, it's actually an upside. So if men wanted to be better at being doctors, they have to learn more of agreeableness, empathy, compassion than they might otherwise have to in another field. So, and I was going somewhere with this point, I've forgotten now. Maya had brought up something that I thought was interesting too, which is how many of these fields are actually, and I think this is worth studying and getting into. I don't have an answer for this, but how many of these fields make a good deal of money, and then if women start to take over, the fields get devalued? I think it would be interesting to see what happens to doctors' salary as more and more women take over. I don't know. Were you going to say something, Nate? And then I want to get Xandering. Sounded like you were about to say something, so I want to.
Me?
Yes. Sorry, that sounded like I don't know.
I
if
think
that
I
was
hit, maybe hit the mic.
Oh.
Oh no, I hit the mic, but I'll take the airtime now, as you know. But no, you know what? It's interesting because well, one thing I always find interesting about this topic, because I think sometimes when you talk about this, people don't understand when you say there is an issue. Like I think when we talk about discrimination, we're really talking about at what scale is this? Is there discrimination? Number one, we all agree yes, but it's just what's the scope and scale of that discrimination, and how does it affect where we're at now? And I think that's the key piece that we're just kind of, I don't want to say pussyfooting around, but I will say it anyway. And that's what we're talking about. And I think most reasonable people who are reading the studies, who are just looking at the data, would say that discrimination is real, but it is a negligible part of that pay gap. That pay gap is not based on discrimination. And there's a margin of error that's not being accounted for in that pay gap. So, what else will, it's just like, where do you go from there?
Xandering?
Well, I today, in today's world, I should say, more recent past, it seems like there's kind of a group of people that kind of believe more in the equality of outcome than the equality of opportunity. And if they don't see an equal outcome, then they automatically assume that there's some sort of discrimination problem, and they raise a ruckus about it. And we're seeing this happen more and more and more, where it seems like a very vocal minority of people go, hey, wait, there's a discrepancy here. These aren't equal outcomes. They don't bother to, again, look at the nuance of the issue, and they start crying about it. I hate to say crying. They start being very vocal, and they often get pretty intransigent about some of these topics. And when you have people that come out and say, wait, this is far more nuanced, and you need to really take a deep look at the reasons behind this. And it doesn't seem that this group cares that it's nuanced. They don't care about the nuance at all. They're just like, no, this is a problem. This is continuing evidence of the toxic patriarchy of the United States, and they just go on this crusade to try and get laws passed to fix a problem that, if you actually look at the experts that have looked and taken a deep dive into the field, say this really isn't much of a problem, and it's certainly not a problem for the reason you think that it is. So I'm wondering if our own kind of social evolution, and especially with the ease of information on the internet, has made some of these problems appear far worse than they actually are.
Well, let me interrupt real quick to suggest, too, that the group in particular that you're talking about, people may take a guess as to what that is. But keep in mind, Biden was the one who came out and didn't look at this problem before he said that and he literally said that the women's soccer pay is proof of this gap. And it irrefutably is not, even if you have decided that this gap is completely real and all. Women's soccer team is not, and he came up on national television and said that. So that group, in my view, is really the left, and it's kind of the further on the left, but that group is leftist. Male, female, doesn't matter. It's people on that far on the left that seems to be that group. It's not men, women, it's people on that far of the left. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, no, it does. It sounds fair, but like I consider myself sometimes to be left in it. And when it comes to the women's soccer issue, I honestly did support them at the beginning. I was fooled. I was fooled because it just didn't make sense at the beginning. And whenever you look at, I have two girls and I would want them to get as much money as an NBA player does, right? But we know the WNBA and the NBA are two different things, right? It's just two different things. One generates more money. One, it's one is more exciting for fans and that type of thing. And it doesn't mean to say that the other game is not good. It's just doesn't bring in the bank as the other one. Now, but that changes when it comes to tennis. In tennis, guess what? The women are just as exciting and just as popular as the men, and make just as much money as the men, right? Because Serena Williams is a household name, right? When you can't, so I think that is the difference when you talk about something like tennis versus something like the NBA, and you're always going to have there's a football, what is it, the Women's National Football League? Remember there's a football league now where they wear like lingerie or something like that.
Oh yeah,
but they're not making what the NFL players are making, and they got teams all over the country, right? So I think I think one thing that we all have to understand when it comes to this issue is that on one end, yes, there is discrimination out there that is real, and we definitely should address that and make and try to address it in a real meaningful way. But I think on the opposite side of that, I think what happened with the U.S. women's national team, unfortunately, that was them trying to take an opportunity to hijack the movement and get their $66 million because they got paid more. They got paid more. They had guaranteed money, especially last year when the men made absolutely nothing and they made millions of dollars. Like game over, right? It's like what more do you need to know? So, yeah, I think he should have did his homework. But what politicians are out there doing their homework, right? How often I've seen your things about Trump, so it's it's just sometimes it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, we were big fans of Trump. Well, please let's. I think we're gonna need to be wrapping up reasonably soon. So, as Andrew, please say what you wanted to say, and then we'll start to wrap it up.
I was just going to point out that as much as I hate being fair to politicians, there are so many issues that they are supposed to do something about. Way for them to actually research all of these topics, which is why they have aides and things. And when their team around them drops the ball, it makes them look ridiculous. But it happens far too often, and so yeah, it was just a minor point.
You know what? Sinister Porpoise writes in the chat, I like to point out that the men's team hasn't won the World Cup since 1930. Well, the women's World Cup just started in 1990. So even that the men hasn't won the World Cup ever, right? But do you know, if the men just qualify for the World Cup, their prize money is more than the women's team, right, from FIFA. The men's team generates for instance, in the last World Cup, France, the prize money and the money generated for the men's game, the winning team, France, got $30 million. For the entire World Cup of the Women's World Cup, their prize money was $30 million. That's everybody, right? So the winning team, France, made more than the entire Women's World Cup generated. So yeah, the women, it's just like the women could win the World Cup every year. But that doesn't mean they should get paid as much as the men who, if they won the World Cup, because they're two totally different things. Now, it's just like the WNBA. Yes, you could have the same team win every time with the WNBA. That doesn't mean they should be paid as much as the NBA champions would. That people would say that was ridiculous, right? Because the NBA players generate that much more money. Does that make sense? I don't want to feel like I'm bashing it, but I just want to make it very, very clear. That's the reason why that argument is fallacious. It's just like, they won all these World Cups. Well, I won 10 straight championships in my rec league. That doesn't mean I should be paid like NBA players, right? It's just that's how much money you're generating. Who wants to come see you play? That's how that is done.
Well, so there is okay. So there's a genuine problem. I mean, listen, I bash capitalism all the time for any number of reasons. I especially think we should have socialized medicine. I think that, but I think it works far better than I would never be an advocate for communism or socialism. I think there are many reasons why capitalism, just simply put, is the best alternative. It has to be tempered, absolutely. But I fucking wrote a book about that, so I'm on team. Let's keep it in check. But on the flip side, but having said that, so I saw your video with Legal Bites on this. I really like. I mean, Legal Bites just broke it down. At first, I was like, okay, you don't have to break it down so simple. And then I realized she just ended up calling it back to this. But okay, look, a business has income. Or it has revenue and expenses. That's it. And the job of the business is to try to make money and make money for the people who've invested in it, and make money just so they can stay afloat. And if the expenses exceed the revenue for any significant period of time, they go into debt and or eventually become bankrupt. So now the business wants to survive. It wants to make as much money as possible. So do you. So there is this constant competition between the employees who want to get as much money as they can out of that company and the company that wants to get as much work for as little pay out. And that right there is capitalism. That is capitalism in a nutshell. We are doing this all the time. It's this competition. It's the Darwinism that you had mentioned earlier. And one problem is, you could, if you wanted to, for example, say that in every single sport, the men's team and the female team needs to be paid exactly identically dollar for dollar, not as a percentage of, say, tickets or revenue or how much they bring in, but dollar for dollar. That's not going to work because in some sports, the women dominate and women are much more appreciated in those sports than the men. Tennis, I think, is absolutely one of them. And then in other sports, and by the way, MMA has become one of them. Gymnastics. MMA has become one of them and was one of them for about 3 or 4 years, where Ronnie Rousey got paid more than any other MMA fighter in history. She currently holds the record for the amount of money ever earned by an MMA fighter. She earned $3 million for a 48-second match. But the reason she earned so much was because she could pull that in. She could negotiate for that because she knew. Drawing. Yeah, she was just all of a sudden women's MMA became big and she became big. That changed the game for absolutely everybody. And the problem is a business cannot stay in business if they pay teams that draw less as much as the teams or the people that draw more. And despite the fact that the men really sucked, and there's no way, I was trying to be polite earlier, but they've really, sucked ass. Despite that, the problem is if they end up, and the reality is actually they didn't really bring in that much money in terms of tickets. That's one reason they got so little. But in that case, it really is, I think, what you said earlier. It's a difference in the contract. The women had the opportunity for the same contract. They turned it down. But in terms of many sports, soccer Americans aren't usually very big in soccer anyway. But the ones that we are big into, football, baseball, tennis, there are disparities in what people are interested in for reasons I can't fathom or understand, but that changes how much money comes in, and that changes how much the companies can actually pay, even if they wanted to be completely egalitarian in pay.
It's interesting. I sent you the clip of the Australian team. Now, it's so funny that they had a kind of a reverse situation happen in Australia. I was doing a video on it, and what happens is that they had this female only. They call it netball, but netball is almost, you can consider it to be basketball. The rules are a little funky, but it's basketball without a backboard.
Did you want me to play it?
They'll argue with that, but bear with me.
Do you want to?
Oh no, you can play it, but you can play it. It's fine.
Let's play this. We're gonna play this.
But
it's only like a minute, right? Yeah.
But just let me. Yeah, just let me tee it up though, just so everybody understands. So what happens is that the men's there was a men's team to play netball, and they said, they was like, well, but there's not enough men who want to start a league. So for inclusion, they said, well, hey, we'll let the men's team compete with the women's league. So this is essentially an expansion team of men who are playing in a professional women's netball league. And this is what happened.
All right, let's get this up here.
Now, generally, for everybody to know, expansion teams are bad. They win very little games, even if any. So,
All right, let's hold on. Let me. I'm going to rewind this just a sec. So you don't see it when it comes up because you're looking at my camera. You get to see my handsome face the entire show. You don't get to see the screen. So I'm gonna put this up here and let's go.
Unified on court, but a different attitude among the crowd.
These are for girls only. Remind me of your gender again.
The Queensland Suns all-boys team, the new under-18 state champions, beating Bond University's Bull Sharks, an all-female side.
One of my former teammates, Matt Geyer, his daughter actually played against that male team. They had no chance. Like the males were just like too fast, too physical. It was just a disadvantage to the girls.
Everyone should have the right to participate in any sport they choose, and it doesn't matter what your gender is.
There is no boys tournament due to low player numbers, so the team was placed in the girls competition.
This was just an opportunity and a platform for the men and boys to continue to grow and love and explore and experience our game.
It's believed the Suns weren't abused by players, but from parents in the crowd, allegedly making vulgar comments from behind the team's bench.
For those young boys in particular to be experiencing that was, such an incredible shame.
Bond University told 7 News, "We are incredibly proud of the performance of our under-18 Bull Sharks. The structure of the competition is a matter for Netball Queensland."
We just want to create a space where boys can play netball and sort of change that landscape.
Netball Queensland is now working on a men's standalone tournament next year. Brittany Lane, 7 News.
All right. There you go. All right. So,
now,
please.
I would say this. That's not fair, right? That's just not fair. And it's not fair for the just biological reasons. So, first, I think we have to also understand that there are gender differences. But, if we're just saying whoever can play the best should get the most money, I don't think that's the answer. What I do think is the answer is whoever can sell the most tickets, like Ronda Rousey. I don't think Ronda Rousey can beat the male heavyweight champion in MMA like Brock Lesnar. But she made more money than him because more people wanted to see her fight. More people wanted to see her compete. Same thing with Serena Williams. You can watch most people didn't even know who the male champion was, but they knew who Serena Williams was in the old Williams system fight. That packed the house. So, there are a lot of these differences here, but I just want to, my argument is that it's not always discrimination. And it's sometimes we have to have those hard conversations to really get to the right answers. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Xandering, was there anything else you wanted to say? And we'll kind of call it a night.
I think I'm going to just have to, every time we cover a topic, I'm just going to have to end everything with, this topic is far more complicated and nuanced than people want it to be. And you're not really going to get a good view of what's really going on unless you actually dig into the details.
Well, and at a minimum, I think my hope is that we've sort of encouraged that. I think, again, bringing it back to the beginning, that for me was one of the most shocking. I don't expect the President of the United States to get everything right, and especially even when I voted for him, nobody expected Trump to get anything right for that matter. But the bar's gone up a little bit, and I was shocked when you just said this is proof of, and no, it really isn't. And I think it's. You can't spend your entire life breaking down the numbers of absolutely everything. So you have to rely on experts. You have to rely on people you trust, and there are people on every side of this that are saying quite a lot. But I think this is an issue that's worth. For me, one of the most shocking things was Hillary Clinton talking about one of the best possible solutions was paternity leave for men and trying to encourage. And I was like, okay, that's and her admission that, look, I don't think the solution to this is trying to fight the inequality. Trying to fight discrimination. It's trying to find ways to fix it from other areas, including but not limited to raising men up to the point where they're taking these responsibilities, thereby giving women the option to keep working if they want to while the man stands home, or however, just based on the needs of the family, to fight the stereotype that dads can't be as good a parent as mothers. So, all right. Well, Nate, we'd love to hear a little bit more about your channel. We do have all the links down at the bottom, and we'd love to hear if you have any other final thoughts. This was we wanted to have you on Originally, we were going to be discussing one of your other videos on and when your lamp had that issue with my coat, and we ended up just the whole show got scrapped. You couldn't make it because your lamp was very sensitive. we did still cover the topic, and I think we did pretty well. But I'm really glad this was I think this was a good topic to do. So thank you very much for coming, and tell us a little bit more about where people can find you and what you do.
Oh, with Google search Nate the Lawyer and you'll see him. I'm all over the place. I do. And my channel is just simply one thing. It's taking the law, breaking it down, and making it simple. So I that's really what I try to do. But and I try to have a little fun with it. So if you like that type of stuff and you really wanna, if you want to really be the judge, because that's really what I'm most famous for, is giving you the facts, giving you the law, and then letting you just come to your own decision. And no matter what that decision is, and a lot of times people are surprised to what decisions they come to after the facts and the law are presented. And that's the game we play. So come check it out.
All right, I highly recommend it. Both Xandring and I love to watch your videos. Xandring, anything else before we wrap it up?
Nothing other than go over and check Nate's channel out. I think he does a really great job of laying out both sides, saying here's the facts, here's the situation. You need to make a decision as to what the outcome should be, and does a great job at it. So you should definitely go check him out.
And we had several requests, Nate, for you to come onto the Discord. We'd like to do an after show. I'll be there for a little bit. My hope is Xandring will be there, and if we can get you to the Discord tonight. I know we hadn't talked about it beforehand, so it's getting late, and you've got a family. So, but if it's something you can make, would love to have you after the show.
No, well, I don't think I'll be able to make it tonight because I definitely have to get up early tomorrow. But maybe some other time. Maybe after another show, I'll stop by. But
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Tonight's a little rough for me. So.
Listen, if I'd been smart I should remember that 50% of the time I remember to ask guests like days in advance so they schedule for it. I didn't do that with you, so it doesn't it doesn't work if I don't let people know. So I'll be in the live chat in a few minutes, the Discord chat a few minutes after this. So will Xandring, and otherwise, thank you all for joining us. Nate, once again, good to see you as always, and look forward to having you on later. I'd love to come on your channel, but the problem is I ain't a lawyer, so I'm really out of my depth most of the time. We'll figure out if there's anything I can contribute. I'm pretty much moving from live streams. Like live streams are a rarity on my channel now. But yeah, so as soon as we get something, because we probably have to do something produced, but we'll get something good together because there's so many good topics out there. So I look forward to it. All right, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you all in a bit. Oh, tomorrow, I forgot. Tomorrow, Dr. John Shook will be on to discuss the definition of atheism. Nate, don't say nothing. Dr. John Shook, definition of atheism tomorrow
I remember
night.
that old school.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're not trying to tweak anyone. All right, thank you all, and we will catch you tomorrow night.